Okay, and for this tutorial of mechanical relationships, I'm gonna show you how to assemble the components that we just created, which is we have to assemble a gear and the rack. So in this case, we create a new assembly, and by default, it's going to ask us what do we want to put into the assembly. I want to show you something else before. As you can see, I have no parts. And just to show you that the module is what matters in a gear, here in the assemblies I also can create more parts. So I'm gonna go ahead and create a spur gear. So I will click and drag. By default I'm gonna have this spur gear, but on the left as usual I can configure my component. So if you remember, the module was 10. But to show you that it can be different, I'm gonna create a gear that instead of having 10 teeth, is gonna have 20. Pressure angle is gonna be the same, phase wide is gonna be 20, just the same that we did with the others. Hub diameter, I'm not gonna take that into account. Let me see here. Okay, this is the diameter, and I'm gonna show all 20 teeth. So I'm gonna click on the tick. By default, when I try to create a part on an assembly, it's going to create the same, and then it's going to attach one to the mouse. So if we just want one, I'm gonna click on the X, and I have the original one. So I have one gear with 20 teeth, but the module is 10. So supposedly it should fit with the order that I just created. So how is this gonna work? The first thing that I need to do with this type of assemblies always is right click on the first part that was created and select the option float, because as you know, the first part that you always put in an assembly is fixed, it's locked, so it doesn't move, and the idea is that we need to make everything move. So I'm gonna click on float. Now that it floats, it's able to be moved, but since here it's able to be moved. Things to keep in mind in the assembly. The assembly has its own planes. So I'm gonna right click on right plane and I'm gonna click on show. So I can have my right plane. As you can see, the gear is aligned to the right plane. Let me show you. The right plane is, the gear is aligned to the right plane. Let's just change the orientation. Here, the right plane is here, but it's not in the middle. I mean, one of these faces is not touching the right plane. So the first thing that I'm going to do is create a mate, and I'm gonna make coincident. What am I going to make coincident? I'm gonna make coincident the right plane with this surface. So yes, it moves somewhere else, but now when I take a look to the right plane, again, the orientation, the right plane is aligned to the surface, which is what we need. I'm going to align all the components with the right plane of the assembly so we can make everything work. Now, I have my first part. Then I'm gonna click on insert components, and I have here my gear and here my rack. If you remember the names, are them. So I'm gonna select here and select open. As you see, since the first one I created, it has only 10 teeth, well, it's a lot smaller. But here, if you take a look, it works because the module is the same. So I'm gonna put it here, then I'm gonna zoom to fit, and I have to create the same mate. So I'm gonna say mate, and I'm gonna make coincident the right plane with the surface. Then I finish. So I have both of my gears aligned, even though they are not like in the correct position, but they are aligned. The surface is aligned. And then I'm gonna do the same but with the rack. So I'm gonna click on insert components, and I'm gonna insert the rack. And as you can see, the rack is not in the correct direction. Let's see. So the rack is here. So I have to do exactly the same. I'm gonna go to mate, select coincident between the right plane and the surface. The thing is that the alignment was not properly placed, so I have to click here where it says align, and it turns. So now I have this. I know that all of them are aligned with the plane that I need. First thing that I need to do is to select the way this thing is going to be. So I'm going to say this is the top plane. So I'm going to align, I'm going to make coincident the rack with the top plane. In that order, I'm going to select coincident, I'm going to make the top plane, and I'm going to select this surface to be coincident. So now I am sure of different things. I am sure that this is horizontal and all of them are aligned. So if you take a look, since all the modules are equal to 10, if I put this here and I put this here, for example, it has to work. It has to work. Now, in order to complete the mate, the idea is that if I rotate this, all of these will move, and if I move this, all of them will move. So in order to complete that, I have to create a position that will be fixed. So step by step, this thing will not only move like this, because it is the mates that I created only allow it to be moved like this. So this one is already aligned. Now what am I going to do? I'm going to align this one first, the big one. So let's say that I'm going to put it here. How do you know where to put it? Because you're going to zoom here and make sure of this. When you open this rack, the rack is this one, the plain one. When you open the rack, you're going to find something called tooth cut seam. When you open the operation, you're going to find this. This is how the part was made. So I'm going to right click on here and I'm going to select show. When I select show, by default I can see here this drawing. I will do the same with the pinion, with this gear, this big gear. So I'm going to open it and I'm going to go to the operation tooth cut. I will open it, I right click on it and I select visible or show. What's the idea of a mate? That here and here, when I move this, and I put it like here, I'm gonna zoom to fit so you can check that this line in the teeth of the rack and this line in the teeth of the pinion, they both should match. So how does this work? They are matching but not evenly, so they have to match, they have to match like here. Now let's say that this is tangent to this. In that order it has to work. So now I'm gonna zoom to fit. I'm sure that this is the position that I want. Since I'm sure that this is the position that I want, and I'm also sure that all of them are aligned to the right plane, on the right plane, I'm gonna create a sketch. My sketch will be a circle, and that circle will be exactly in the middle of this. It doesn't really matter the radius. I'm gonna finish the sketch, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a mate that will be concentric between this, which is like the pinion, and this circle. By default now, the pinion can only rotate. It's the only thing it can do. Now it doesn't move because it is attached to the circle that I draw. So now this is rotating and this can only move in this direction. And we know because of the structure that we did that it is properly aligned. So next step is to create the mate between this and this. So both will move at the same time. In that order, I'm going to go to mate, and here under mechanical mates, I'm gonna find this and this, which is rack and pinion. Rack and pinion. So here the parameters that it asks are for the rack and the pinion and gear. In the rack, I'm going to select this line, and in pinion and gear, I'm going to select this one that is matching, and this one. When I finish here, now that I finished, I selected both of the lines that are being aligned. Now that I finished, if I rotate this, the pinion rotates. And you can see in the animation that the module is correct because both are rotating with the same, let's say, pattern, the same module. Now, this is for pinion and rack. For pinion and pinion is pretty much the same. Now, we have this aligned. I'm gonna put it here, let's say. Again, what I have to do is zoom to the area. And once I zoom to the area, I'm going to make the lines, these construction lines, for this pinion, I'm gonna make them visible. So that pinion is this pinion. Again, I'm going to tooth cut. No, it's not that one. It was the other pinion. It's this one, metric, So I go to tooth cut key E, and I select, right click on it, and I select show. Now, once again, what I need to do is to move this thing so they are aligned. As you see, if you align this with this part is not working properly, so you have to align the ones that are physically possible, which is this and this. Then I'm going to zoom here. Again, I will close this, and on the right plane, I'm gonna make another sketch. So, sorry, I select right plane, I go to sketch, I make a select circle, I zoom a little bit, and I'm going to make a circle that is here and here. I finish my sketch, and then I create the mate to make this thing only rotate, which is concentric. So I go to mate, select concentric. It has to be concentric between this sketch and this circle. I click on the tick, so now it only rotates. And once that I have this properly aligned, let's put it a little bit more here. Once that is properly aligned, I'm going to select the mate that I need, which is not on a standard mate but on mechanical, and the one that I need is gear to gear. So gear to gear, here it only asks you for what do you want to create the relationship to, and that's the reason why you match this with this. So you select this line, and then you select this other line, and finally when you click on the tick and you go out of the mates by clicking on all the ticks, they have to move. So if I move this one, if I move this gear, the other one moves, and since the other is attached to the rack and to the rack, it has to work. To hide the lines, remember, you just have to open here the gear, check the operation tooth cut, right click on the only sketch that is there and select hide, and then do the same on the other gear, which is this one. You open it, go to tooth cut, right click on this and select hide. And now with the rack, again tooth cut, right click on it, hide. And this is the way the assembly should look. This is the way that you can make sure that it works. So to make it simple, in this video you learned that you can, yes, create parts in an assembly by using the toolbox. Second, if you need to create this assembly, you have to make sure that the first part that you insert, it's floating. So you right click on this and you put float, but since it is floating, the only option that it shows is fixed. Then all the parts that you put into the assembly must be aligned. I did the alignment using the right plane. All of them are aligned to the right plane. If your component has to rotate, you have to create a mate of concentric between the component and the center of the component. And if your component does not have to rotate, you have to make sure that it just moves in one direction. So you fix the plane side, the plane surface, to the planes of the assembly, and that's pretty much it. At the end, if you create all the relationships properly, you should be able to create one of these assemblies. And the cool part of this is that using this, you can make sure that whenever you print, it's gonna work. And remember that here you have the tool evaluate, so you can also measure. You can also measure, for example, from this point to this point, and you can make sure when you print, after you print, you can make sure how to put this to work together using this distance.